The night he found out began like any other. Quiet, unremarkable, wrapped in the dull comfort of routine. Rain traced thin silver lines down the apartment window as Daniel Harper loosened his tie and set his briefcase by the door. He had no idea that within hours, the life he believed he understood would fracture in ways he could never fully repair. Maya hadn't answered his messages all day. That alone was unusual. For months, she had been careful, attentive in a restrained way, as though she were constantly measuring the weight of her words. He'd assumed it was stress. She had always carried herself like someone guarding a secret, but Daniel, in his certainty, never imagined the secret was him. He poured himself a drink he barely tasted and stared at his phone again. No reply. The silence pressed against his chest, a subtle warning he chose to ignore. They hadn't planned to meet that evening, yet something restless pulled him out into the rain. He drove without thinking, hands tight on the steering wheel, until the familiar brick building appeared through the mist. Maya's flat was dark except for one light glowing faintly in the kitchen. He knocked once. Then again. The door opened slowly. Maya stood there pale, eyes shadowed, her hair pulled back in a careless knot. She looked thinner somehow, more fragile, and yet there was a firmness in her gaze that made Daniel's breath catch. "You shouldn't be here," she said softly. "I was worried," he replied. "You disappeared." She stepped aside, letting him in. The air inside smelled of chamomile and something else, sterile, almost clinical. His eyes drifted to the small crib tucked against the living room wall. Daniel stopped walking. For a moment, his mind refused to make sense of what he was seeing. The room was quiet, too quiet, until a tiny sound cut through the stillness, a soft, breathy whimper. "What is that?" he asked, though some instinct already knew. Maya closed the door behind him. "Her name is Lily." He turned slowly. The crib was real. The blankets were real. And inside, impossibly small and undeniably alive, was a baby with dark lashes and a familiar curve to her mouth. His mouth went dry. "Whose baby is that?" Maya didn't answer immediately. She moved toward the crib, resting a hand on its edge as if drawing strength from it. "I was going to tell you," she said. "I just kept waiting for the right moment." Daniel's heart pounded so loudly he could hear it in his ears. "Tell me what?" She looked up at him then, and there was no hiding left in her eyes. No deflection. No escape. "She's yours." The word struck him with physical force. He laughed once, a sharp, disbelieving sound that echoed wrong in the room. "That's not funny." "I'm not joking." He shook his head. "No. That's impossible. You would have told me. I would have known." "I tried," she said, her voice cracking despite her effort to remain calm. "But every time I opened my mouth, I saw the life you were building. The plans. The expectations. And I couldn't bring myself to destroy it." Daniel staggered back, sinking onto the sofa. His mind raced through memories he had never questioned. Missed calls, sudden illnesses, the way she'd stopped meeting his eyes months ago. "How long?" he whispered. "She's 3 months old." 3 months. The room felt smaller, the walls closing in. "You let me believe, all this time." Tears welled in Maya's eyes, but she blinked them back. "I didn't want anything from you. I wasn't going to tell you at all." "Then why now?" She hesitated, then reached into a drawer and pulled out an envelope. Her hands trembled as she placed it on the table between them. "Because I don't have much time left." The words barely registered. "What?" "I'm sick, Daniel." The rain outside intensified, drumming against the windows as if the world itself had leaned closer to listen. He stared at her, at the woman he thought he knew, and suddenly realized how little he'd truly seen. "What do you mean, sick?" he asked. She swallowed. "It started during the pregnancy. I ignored it. I thought it was exhaustion. But it isn't." His eyes flicked to the envelope, unopened. Fear crawled up his spine. "Why didn't you tell me any of this?" "Because I didn't want Lily to be a reason you stayed," Maya said quietly. "And I didn't want pity." Daniel stood and moved toward the crib, drawn by a force he couldn't name. Lily stirred, her tiny fingers curling in her sleep. Up close, there was no denying it. The resemblance was undeniable. The same chin. The same quiet intensity, even in rest. His knees felt weak. "I have a daughter," he murmured, the truth settling heavy and irreversible in his chest. Maya watched him carefully, as though afraid one wrong word might shatter him. I wasn't trying to steal something from you, she said. I was trying to protect her. And you? He turned back to her, anger and awe colliding inside him. You don't get to decide that alone. I know. Silence stretched between them, thick with everything unsaid. Finally, Daniel picked up the envelope. His fingers hovered over the seal. What happens now? He asked, his voice low. Maya's gaze dropped to Lily, then lifted again, resolute and afraid all at once. That depends on what you choose to do next. He broke the seal slowly, unaware that the words inside would demand more from him than he had ever been prepared to give, and that this moment, standing in a quiet room with rain-soaked windows and a sleeping child, was only the beginning of a truth far more devastating than either of them yet understood. The paper trembled slightly in Daniel's hands as he unfolded it. Medical terminology stared back at him, cold and precise, outlining a reality that felt anything but. His eyes skimmed the lines at first, refusing to absorb their meaning, until one sentence anchored itself brutally in his mind. Advanced. Aggressive. Limited options. He lowered the paper slowly. Maya watched him with a calm that felt practiced, as though she had rehearsed this moment alone 100 times. I didn't want you to read it like that, she said softly. Standing up. I thought, maybe sitting. Daniel didn't sit. He couldn't. His chest felt too tight, his thoughts colliding with each other. How long? He asked, the question barely forming. The doctors won't give exact numbers, she replied. Months. Maybe longer if the treatment works. And Lily? His voice cracked despite his effort. You planned all this knowing she might. I planned knowing she would need you, Maya interrupted, the calm finally breaking. Even if you never knew it was coming. Anger flared then, sharp and sudden. You don't get to drop this on me like it's a quiet confession. This is my life too. I know, she whispered. That's why I kept it secret until I was sure. Sure that she was healthy. Sure that I could survive long enough to give her a start. Daniel ran a hand through his hair, pacing the small room. Every step felt like walking through shattered glass. He stopped by the window, staring out at the blurred city lights. Somewhere out there, people were living normal lives, unaware that his had just split in two. When were you going to tell me? He asked without turning around. I wasn't, she admitted. Not unless I had to. And now you have to. Yes. He turned back to her. Why now? Maya hesitated, then reached for Lily, lifting her carefully from the crib. The baby stirred, her eyes fluttering open for a brief second before settling again. Because she's starting to recognize faces, Maya said. And I don't want the first one she loses to be mine. The words landed heavily, sinking deep. Daniel felt something inside him shift, fear giving way to a fierce, unfamiliar protectiveness. He stepped closer, studying Lily's tiny features again, the weight of responsibility settling over him like a mantle he had never asked for but could not refuse. Does she know me? He asked. Not yet, Maya said. But she will. If you let her. He reached out tentatively, his finger brushing Lily's small hand. She curled her fingers around his instinctively, gripping with surprising strength. His breath caught. The room seemed to tilt. I don't know how to do this, he confessed. I didn't even know I was supposed to. Maya's eyes softened. Neither did I. They stood there in silence, the only sound Lily's gentle breathing. Daniel realized then that every version of his future he had imagined, career milestones, quiet weekends, carefully planned ambitions, had been erased. In its place was something terrifying and fragile and real. What treatment are you considering? He asked finally. Chemotherapy, Maya replied. It's aggressive. There are risks. Does it help? Sometimes. That's not an answer. It's the only honest one. Daniel nodded slowly. Then you're not doing this alone. Maya looked at him sharply. Daniel. I mean it, he said, meeting her gaze. You don't get to decide everything by yourself anymore. A tear slipped free despite her efforts. I was afraid you'd say that. Why? Because if you stay, she said quietly, it will hurt you. He glanced down at Lily again. It already does. The days that followed blurred together. Daniel found himself learning the rhythms of Maya's world. Hospital visits, whispered conversations with doctors, nights broken by Lily's cries. He rearranged his schedule without telling anyone why, cancelled meetings, ignored calls. Some part of him knew explanations would come later, but for now, this was where he needed to be. He learned how to hold Lily properly, how to warm bottles, how to recognize the subtle differences between hunger and discomfort. Each small success anchored him, made the impossible feel just barely manageable. Maya watched him closely, gratitude and guilt warring in her expression. "You don't have to do this," she reminded him one evening as he rocked Lily to sleep. "I want to," he replied simply. "But what about your life?" He smiled faintly. "This is my life now." Treatment began soon after. Maya grew weaker, the color draining from her face, but she remained determined, insisting on being present for every milestone, no matter how small. Daniel took photos, documented moments, memorized the sound of Lily's laughter as if afraid the memory might be stolen from him. Late one night, after Lily had finally fallen asleep, Maya spoke into the darkness. "If something happens to me..." Daniel stiffened. "Don't. You need to know," she insisted. "I've made arrangements. Legal ones." He closed his eyes. "Stop planning your absence. I'm planning her future." He turned to face her. "Then plan it with me." She studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "All right." But even as they spoke, a shadow lingered, unspoken questions, hidden truths Daniel hadn't yet uncovered. Because buried beneath the medical reports and sleepless nights was another secret, one Maya hadn't told him yet. A truth tied not just to Lily's birth, but to the past Daniel believed he had left behind. The realization came to Daniel slowly, like a chill that crept in without warning. It wasn't something Maya said, but something she avoided. Certain names never surfaced. Certain questions were redirected with gentle efficiency. And every time the past edged too close, she would look away, as though bracing herself against a blow she knew was coming. He noticed it one afternoon at the hospital. Maya had been asleep, exhaustion finally claiming her after a long round of treatment. Daniel sat in the corner chair with Lily nestled against his chest, her small weight warm and grounding. A nurse entered quietly, checked the monitors, then glanced at Lily with a smile. "She has his eyes," the nurse said casually. Daniel looked up. "Mine?" The nurse hesitated. "I assumed. Daniel Harper." His stomach tightened. "Yes." She nodded, then added, "Just like her uncle's. Genetics can be uncanny." Daniel frowned. "Her uncle?" The nurse flushed. "I'm sorry. I must have misunderstood." But the words lingered long after she left. That evening, as Maya stirred awake, Daniel watched her carefully. "Who's your brother?" he asked, keeping his tone light. Maya stiffened almost imperceptibly. "I don't have one." "You don't?" he replied. The nurse thought. She was mistaken, Maya said quickly. Too quickly. Daniel didn't press her then. But the seed had been planted. Later that night, after Lily was asleep and the flat was quiet, he wandered into the spare room Maya used as storage. He hadn't meant to pry. Truly. But something tugged at him, an unease he couldn't shake. He opened a box labeled simply Old Things. Inside were photographs. Letters. A life neatly folded away. His breath caught when he saw the face staring back at him from one of the pictures. Older than he remembered, but unmistakable. Ethan. Daniel's younger brother. The room spun. His heart pounded as he sifted through the box with shaking hands. There were more photos, Maya and Ethan together, laughing, their closeness undeniable. Letters written in Ethan's familiar scrawl, full of warmth and longing. And dates. The timeline slammed into him with brutal clarity. Ethan had disappeared from Daniel's life years ago, vanishing after a bitter argument that neither of them had been brave enough to mend. Daniel had convinced himself it was for the best. That some distances were necessary. He had been wrong. Daniel sank onto the floor, the weight of the truth crushing him. Lily's face flashed in his mind. The eyes. The chin. The resemblance he'd attributed to coincidence. He heard movement behind him. Maya stood in the doorway, her face drained of color. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. "You were never supposed to see that," she said finally. His voice was hoarse. "How long did you plan on keeping this from me too?" Tears welled in her eyes. "I didn't know how." Daniel stood, the photos clenched in his hand. "Is Lily?" Maya nodded, her shoulders trembling. "She's Ethan's." The words sliced through him. "You told me she was mine." "I told you she was yours," Maya replied, her voice breaking. "Because I knew you would never abandon her." And because, in every way that matters, she is. Anger surged, raw and overwhelming. You lied to me. Yes. You let me believe. I let you love her, Maya interrupted. Because she needs that love. And because Ethan can't give it to her anymore. The air seemed to leave Daniel's lungs. What do you mean, can't? Maya closed her eyes. Ethan is dead. The room fell silent. He died before she was born, Maya continued softly. An accident. He didn't even know I was pregnant. Daniel staggered back, gripping the edge of the table. His brother, gone. A daughter he would never know. A life erased while Daniel had been busy building walls. Why didn't you tell me? He whispered. Because you hated him, she said. And I couldn't bear the thought of you looking at Lily and seeing only regret. Daniel shook his head. I didn't hate him. I was angry. There's a difference. But I didn't know that, Maya replied. And I was afraid. Afraid you'd walk away from both of us. He stared at Lily's sleeping form through the open door. The truth twisted inside him, grief and guilt colliding until he could barely breathe. You stole my choice, he said quietly. I gave her a chance, Maya said, tears streaming freely now. And I gave you one too. Daniel sank back into the chair, the fight draining out of him. Images of Ethan flooded his mind, his laugh, his stubbornness, the argument that had ended everything. Regret burned hotter than anger ever could. She deserves to know who she comes from, he said finally. Yes, Maya agreed. But she also deserves stability. Someone who will be there when I can't be. Daniel looked at Maya then, really looked at her. Frail but fierce. Guilty but resolute. A woman who had carried impossible burdens alone. I don't know what this makes me, he said. Maya swallowed. It makes you the man she'll call father. The word echoed in his chest. Outside, dawn began to break, pale light creeping into the room. Daniel felt suspended between past and future, loss and responsibility, truth and love. And beneath it all, one question remained, one he wasn't yet ready to ask. What would happen when the world learned the truth he had only just begun to face? Daniel didn't sleep that night. He sat by the window, Lily cradled against his chest, watching the city awaken as if nothing had changed. Cars moved. Lights flicked on. Somewhere, people laughed over morning coffee. The world had the audacity to continue. Inside him, everything was different. By morning, Maya's strength had faded again. The truth had cost her more than she expected. Daniel noticed how carefully she moved, how her breaths came shallow, as if every inhale required negotiation. I'm sorry, she whispered when she saw his face. I should have trusted you sooner. He didn't answer right away. He was still learning how to exist inside this new reality. You trusted me with her, he said eventually, looking down at Lily. That wasn't nothing. Days passed with an uneasy calm. Daniel informed his firm he would be taking indefinite leave. He didn't offer details. He didn't owe them any. His world had narrowed to hospital corridors, soft blankets, and the steady rhythm of Lily's breathing. But the truth, once unearthed, refused to stay quiet. One afternoon, Daniel received a call from a number he hadn't seen in years. He stared at the screen until it stopped ringing, his chest tight. Moments later, a message appeared. We need to talk. It's about Ethan. Daniel closed his eyes. The past, it seemed, had decided it was finished waiting. He met her 2 days later in a quiet cafe near the river. Hannah looked older, sharper around the edges, but her eyes were the same, direct, unflinching. Ethan's widow. A woman Daniel had avoided not out of hatred, but because she reminded him too much of everything he had lost. You know about the baby, she said after a brief, awkward greeting. Daniel nodded. I do. Hannah exhaled slowly. Good. Then I won't pretend this is casual. You never did, he replied. She studied him. Maya didn't want me to contact you. I figured. But I'm not her, Hannah said. And Lily is my niece. The word landed heavily. Daniel leaned back, folding his hands together. What do you want? Honesty, she said simply. And a plan. Daniel almost laughed. I've had more plans this month than in the last 10 years. None of them survived. Hannah's gaze softened just slightly. Ethan would have wanted her safe. That makes two of us. Silence settled between them, broken only by the hum of quiet conversation around them. Finally, Hannah spoke again. You know Ethan was trying to reach you before he died.
Daniel's heart skipped. What? He left messages. Letters.
He wanted to fix things.
Daniel swallowed hard.
I never got them.
Hannah nodded.
Maya intercepted some.
Not out of malice.
Out of fear. Daniel felt the weight of that truth settle painfully into place. Fear had shaped everything.
He loved you, Hannah added.
He just didn't know how to say it without pride getting in the way. Daniel stared out the window, watching the river flow steadily forward. Neither did I. When he returned home that evening, Maya sensed the shift immediately. You spoke to her, she said. Yes. Her shoulders tensed. Is she angry?
She's realistic, Daniel replied.
Which might be worse.
Maya closed her eyes.
I never wanted to erase Ethan.
I know, Daniel said.
But we can't pretend he doesn't exist.
Tears slipped silently down her cheeks.
I was trying to give Lily peace. And now we have to give her truth, Daniel replied gently. Maya looked at him, fear flickering across her face. And if that truth takes her away from you? Daniel didn't hesitate. Then I'll love her enough to let her go.
The words surprised them both.
That night, as Maya slept fitfully, Daniel held Lily and whispered stories she couldn't yet understand, about a father who had laughed too loudly, about mistakes and forgiveness, about how love could survive even the longest silences. Weeks passed. Maya's condition wavered unpredictably. Some days she laughed, her eyes bright, insisting on taking Lily outside to feel the sun. Other days, she barely rose from bed, her strength slipping through Daniel's fingers no matter how tightly he held on. One evening, Maya reached for his hand.
There's something else, she said quietly. His chest tightened.
Please tell me there are no more secrets. She managed a faint smile.
Not secrets.
Consequences. She explained then, about legal documents still unfinished, about a decision she'd made early on, believing it was the only way to protect Lily. Daniel listened, his jaw tightening with every word. You signed guardianship papers, he said slowly. Without telling me.
I thought I was doing the right thing, she whispered. You were deciding my future for me, he replied, not unkindly.
Again. Maya's eyes filled with regret. I was afraid you'd change your mind. Daniel looked at Lily, asleep between them, unaware of how many lives revolved around her fragile existence.
I won't, he said.
But the law doesn't run on promises. They sat together in silence, the weight of unfinished business pressing down on them both. Outside, the sky darkened, heavy with the promise of rain. Daniel felt it then, an approaching moment, inevitable and unforgiving. The kind of moment that demanded choices, not intentions. And deep inside, another truth stirred, one he had not yet voiced aloud. Loving Lily would mean confronting everything he had avoided for years. And time was no longer on their side. The rain returned the night Maya asked Daniel to promise her something he didn't yet understand. It fell steadily, not violently, as if the sky itself had accepted that some endings did not require drama, only honesty. Stay with her, Maya said, her voice barely louder than the rain tapping the window.
No matter what comes out.
No matter who disagrees. Daniel tightened his grip around her hand. I already am.
She shook her head weakly. Not just physically. Stay present.
Tell her the truth when she's ready.
Tell her about Ethan. About me.
Don't soften it too much. Pain fades, but lies rot.
He swallowed hard.
You're talking like you're leaving. I'm talking like I love her, Maya replied, a faint smile touching her lips.
And you?
The words settled between them, fragile yet undeniable. Daniel realized then that love had crept in quietly, not through romance, but through shared fear, shared responsibility, shared nights where hope was measured in breaths. Maya passed 2 weeks later, just before dawn. Daniel was holding Lily when it happened. Maya's eyes were open, calm, almost relieved. She looked at Lily one last time, then at Daniel.
Thank you, she whispered. For seeing me. For not walking away. Then she was gone. Grief did not arrive all at once.
It came in waves, silent, heavy, relentless. The hospital room felt too large, too empty. Daniel stood there long after the nurses had left, Lily sleeping against his chest, unaware that the world had just shifted irrevocably.
The funeral was small, quiet, honest.
Hannah stood beside Daniel, her hand resting lightly on his shoulder. There were no accusations left between them, no unresolved bitterness. Only shared loss, and a child who connected them more deeply than words ever could. When it came time to speak, Daniel surprised himself by standing. Maya believed love was something you proved in silence, he said, his voice steady despite the ache in his chest. She carried burdens alone so others wouldn't have to. But today, I want to say this aloud. She mattered. She loved fiercely. And her courage will live on. He looked down at Lily then, her small fingers curled around his tie. In her. The legal battles were not kind, nor were they quick. Questions were asked. Papers examined. Decisions challenged. Daniel faced every one of them without retreat. Not with anger, but with resolve. He told the truth. About Ethan. About Maya. About the lie that had begun with fear and ended with love. And when the judge asked why he should be granted permanent guardianship, Daniel answered simply, because she's already my daughter. The room fell silent. Weeks later, the ruling came through. Lily came home with him. The house felt different than it once had, less polished, more alive. Toys scattered across carefully chosen furniture. Bottles warming beside framed photographs. One of Ethan. One of Maya. One of the three of them taken on a day when laughter had briefly outweighed fear. At night, Daniel told Lily stories. Not fairy tales, but truths shaped gently for a child who would one day ask difficult questions. He spoke of a man who loved deeply but struggled to forgive. Of a woman who loved so fiercely she forgot to protect herself. Of mistakes that mattered, and forgiveness that arrived late, but still arrived. Years passed. Lily grew curious, sharp-eyed, unafraid to ask questions that made adults uncomfortable. And when the day came that she asked about her parents, Daniel didn't hesitate. He told her everything. She cried. She raged. She withdrew. And then, one evening, she climbed into his lap and asked quietly, "You chose me, didn't you?" Daniel kissed her hair. Every single day. On the anniversary of Maya's death, they visited the river. Lily placed flowers gently on the water, watching them drift away. "I think she'd like this," Lily said. "I know she would," Daniel replied. As they walked away, hand in hand, Daniel felt something he hadn't felt in a long time, not relief, not closure, but peace. The kind earned only through truth. The kind born when love survives secrets, loss, and time itself. And somewhere between the life he once planned and the one he never expected, Daniel understood the final truth Maya had trusted him with all along. Family is not defined by blood alone. It is defined by who stays.